Danica. Hi, Mari. It's so good to
Hi,
see
Hawa.
you.
It's so nice to see you, even at a distance. Not too distant, but
Yeah, I feel like one of the things I miss the most about the world being open is seeing people like you at dinner and going into a little corner of a bar by ourselves and just
oh, the
hanging out.
best. Oh, the best with like our champagne flutes and we're talking the night away, gossiping and all that stuff. Oh, someday I'll run into you at a party again.
Well, I don't know if a lot of people on this Zoom know, but Mari and I went to high school together in Seattle. So we got that in common.
Little Ballard. Yep.
Exactly. I know everyone's excited to be in conversation with you tonight, to do a workshop with you, and then to hear about your experience with making this beautiful, timely book. So I want to just go ahead and jump into our questions. And let me know if I get out of bounds anywhere. I'm just so excited to be in conversation.
It's so nice to be with you. And I have to say about the high school thing, I don't think either of us regard that as like the best time of our lives.
Yeah.
Um, so it's so like healing in reverse that I know that in hindsight you were there all along. It's so beautiful, and we found each other later in life, but we survived.
We survived high school and Ballard all together.
And look at us now in our homes in Brooklyn.
No, I love it. So I have my copy. I hope everyone else has their copy as well. I have this by my bedside, and I'm so excited to continue diving into it. So just want to just go through some of the questions, and we'll let the conversation take us where it might. So you're well known for your charming and poignant drawings that populate your Instagram page, that are usually a mix of text and drawing. What is your creative process like? Do you come up with the text first and then draw to represent, or do you just doodle? Where do you start?
I think my creative process is a process of collection. So I'll get like one little idea, and it's usually resisting something that I see all over the place. So if everyone's talking about, for example, this entire book is sort of a resistance against positive thinking. So I was seeing positive thinking everywhere a few years ago. And in my mind, I was thinking that doesn't there's something missing with that. There's something not quite right about that kind of, that mantra, to stay positive. And so I started collecting little experiences throughout my life, that ultimately led to this book, which is about really cultivating a whole life as opposed to just a purely happy one. But but in my drawings, which are a little more specific to more smaller experiences than the ones I write about in this book, it'll be little collecting throughout the day. So I'll hear something and I'll think, oh, I want to know more about that, or I'm thinking more about that. And then I feel like it's kind of a archaeological dig throughout the rest of the day or the week, thinking what goes with that theme, or what else can I hear about that? What else can I think about that? And I'll maybe text with friends and something else will come to mind. And it's like suddenly I have this mental box of all these little memories and inspirations. And then the text will come out. The watercolor is always the last to come out. That's like the most random. It's just whatever I feel like drawing at the time, little squiggles or a wash of color, whatever looks good to me. And voila.
I love it because I think people who follow you on Instagram think like you woke up that morning and it just, it's right aligned with the feelings we have. And then boom, we wake up and we see it. And we're like, I'm feeling that way too.
Oh, that's so nice. It's a process for sure.
Oh, I love it. So in The Inner Sky, you talk very, very open about your experience with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which you were diagnosed with later on in life. Has that changed your outlook on life at all? And have you been able to process, what that means for you?
The funniest thing about recovering from that experience, which is now 3 years ago, is that there's this narrative of people who went through like a traumatic experience or a near death experience that suddenly they're just going to be like these wise sages who are full of insight, grateful all the time, kind of living on this higher level than everyone else. And that doesn't happen at all. Like I still get mad when my nail is chipped. I still get upset with Verizon customer service. You know, it's like you're not like suddenly living in this like monk-like state of nirvana. So I think the most surprising thing is it actually didn't change my outlook that much. It was, I tried to integrate it as one more experience that I had. Probably the thing that I learned, the biggest takeaway from it was this in between time that I write about in the book. This is where the Twilight theme comes from. Recovering from illness is a time that society doesn't really know which box to put it in. Like you're not sick, you're not healthy, you have limitations, you might be really good one day and you might falter the next day. And trying to explain that to other people was really hard. And it got me thinking about other times of life where you're kind of in the in-between. I think of like going through a breakup and the aftermath. You know, you're not with this person, but you're not like fully engaging in your Carrie Bradshaw single life. You know, you're in this in-between that's it's hard to articulate, and people always want to put you in a box. They want to say, oh, you're a brand new person now and everything's hopeful and beautiful, or you're in this really difficult place and we're going to send you flowers and know how to show up for you. But it's a lot harder to sit in that in-between place.
Right. It's like I mean, I know this probably has nothing to do with, but in some cultures they have like when a woman gives birth or when a person gives birth, they have like a sitting month, you know, and it lasts, I think, like 3 months. You know, you're no longer a person with a baby, but you're also not yet ready to be, well, you'll never be your old self, right? Because now you've formed into a new part of who you're supposed to be. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you that in our society there isn't that in between space where you're able to just exist and form into a new place or person.
Yeah, and I kind of felt during that time like we don't give ourselves the right to go through these difficult emotions. Like that's a privilege of the human experience, to go through these times of transition and change and even loneliness. And we think if we're lonely, there's something wrong with us, when really it's such a human emotion that we experience throughout the day, all day long, no matter how many friends you are, no matter how successful you are, no matter if you're married, or, you know, you're going to be lonely because you are the only person you truly live with. So giving ourselves, you know, that ownership over these difficult feelings and saying, I'm lonely and I have the right to be lonely, can actually alleviate some of that suffering, I think.
I couldn't agree more. So in My Inner Sky, you talk about embracing, it's about embracing every moment in life or the phase of the sky, be it dark, bright, or dreary. When reading, I couldn't help but think that most of the essays can fit in different phases. How did you pick and choose which stories of your life to associate with a particular phase?
Well, the Twilight one, which is tonight's theme, came first. And I actually thought the whole book was going to be about Twilight. Twilight is this really interesting time because it's not day, it's not night. I think we can have melancholy associations with it because it's sort of, you know, starting to darken in this really beautiful way. But also, if you're like on a really great third date and it's twilight in July and it's 6 p.m. and you're out on a patio drinking rosé, it's like the most magical, beautiful time. So there's really no box that Twilight fits in. That's, you know, the in-between. What is it really? We have no way of defining it. And yet it's like the most beautiful time of day. There's a lot of symbolism there. So I got really into that. And I thought this is going to be a book about transitions. I had just read this great story about how lobsters, when they grow into a new shell, the way they know they're growing is they get really uncomfortable, like they're itchy and it's really unpleasant. But they go in underground and burrow until they're ready to come out. It's kind of like this beautiful sitting month that you described. You know, they have a place to go and they say, all right, guys, I'm going to be alone for a while. Do not disturb. I'll come out when I'm ready, when I'm, grown into a new lobster. And so I wanted to write about those times, like, these very distinct times that we don't have a lot of space in society for. And then I thought, oh, well, I can write about the rest of the day too. So what I wanted to do is play a little bit around with these social constructs we have. We think of light as hope and renewal and energy and love and whatever, and darkness is this really difficult, sad time. But I think of night, often as such a romantic and beautiful time. And why don't we say that interesting, beautiful things happen in the dark and some really difficult things happen in the light? Why don't we play with that a little? So I think any of the essays could have belonged in different times of day, but the way that I organized them was Golden Hour is about being present to what's going on. Twilight is about not having a place to put your feelings and having all these contradicting feelings. Night is uncertainty and the beauty in that. And then dawn is renewal and the difficulty in being, like you said, a new person, a transformed person.
Do you have a favorite phase?
I love all my children. I've been thinking a lot about the dawn one, because I think as a collective, we're sort of, aching for this dawn to bring us out of the night. And I remember when I was going through my illness and all I wanted was to be healthy again. But there were a lot of uncertainties about that. There were a lot of fears. What does that look like? And once I'm healthy, how are people going to treat me, and how, I almost kind of missed some elements of being sick in a way, because it was my old self and being healthy would be my new self, and I didn't know who she was yet. And I think, as a global community, we're like aching for this renewal, but there's also a lot of fears around that, of like, what's that going to look like? And I think, we have to make a lot of space for all of the feelings that go along with that.
Absolutely. I love that. So this might make you a little shy, or maybe it won't, but a lot of people look to you in your illustrations for inspiration and support, myself included. Prior to the pandemic, I used to wake up and go straight to your IG. Who are some people, be it artists, authors, that inspire you?
I am so inspired by people who kind of push a genre in a different direction, or kind of press on the boundary of a genre just by bringing their full self into it. So Alison Bechtel comes to mind. She's a cartoonist, graphic novelist, and you think of graphic novels as kind of playful and funny, and she wrote one about grief that was really beautiful. I think about Lin-Manuel Miranda and Hamilton, like what a musical can be, is a completely different thing now. Or I listen to a lot of Brazilian music, and I love that a lot of modern Brazilian artists are taking some older styles like bossa nova and really putting their own spin on it, combining it with folk styles and hip hop, and, like pressing against what a genre can be. And my favorite illustrators are people who kind of question the form. What can illustration be? What can writing, essay writing be? And I really, really admire people who bring their full selves into what they're doing and then kind of create a new genre, really.
I love that. So you seem to, travel seems to be a big part of your life story. Can you tell me a bit about why you travel solo and how that interacts with your creative process?
I travel solo because I don't like traveling with people. It's not like as brave as it sounds. It's just like, it's so much easier by myself. But I will say, as someone who produces writing and art for a living at this point, I think a amazing way to become creative is to stop making assumptions. That's like the number one way to become more creative. And then B, to be an outsider. And when you're traveling, you don't have the luxury to make a lot of assumptions. You kind of have to look at a place with totally new eyes. And so that's a really creatively rich experience and really inspiring experience. And then to be an outsider and to not know what the customs are, to not know how people interact with each other, you're forced to make a lot of observations, and making observations is like what creativity is to me. So it kind of trains, it's a really good, muscle trainer to travel by yourself.
Where is your favorite place you've traveled to alone?
Brazil.
And where's the next place you're going to go as soon as we're all able?
Oh my gosh, I think about this all the time. I have to say, I was on a sabbatical in Argentina when all of this went down. I was going to take March to go to Patagonia, Argentina, this little mountain town, to study Spanish. And 2 weeks in, I had to fly back. And so I would love to finish out my stay in Argentina. That would be my dream.
I'm crossing my fingers and toes for you. I want
Thank
that.
you. How about you?
Oh my gosh. As soon as the world opens back up, I'm hoping to get back to Cape Town.
Oh,
I just really feel at peace there. And I actually went there alone when I was 25 and ended up staying for about 6 months.
wow.
And so I'm looking forward to just relaxing and eating fish and doing nothing for a while.
Eating fish and doing nothing is my favorite combo. So take me with you. We'll be separate so that we can have our independent experiences. But that sounds it looks beautiful from photos. So
We'll share rosé at Sundowners.
yes, perfect. Embrace all of our emotions. Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Well, in The Inner Sky, you touch on the relationships you have with others, be it romantic interest or your parents, or even a relationship you had with a priest that has visited you in the hospital. Even though this book is very much about the personal inner sky we all have, how do relationships affect the sky? How do these relationships affect the sky?
This book writing was such a solitary experience, and a lot of it is about being alone. It's about feeling alone. When I was sick and when I was grieving and when I was going through various heartbreaks and just all of the little problems we deal with on a daily basis that make us feel bad. And it was written for people who are alone, but I realized at the end it's actually about finding community. Community is an antidote to so many awful things. Violence, separation, it's like community is so healing. And I've spent a lot of my time alone, and I've been cultivating the inner sky of my being, which is integrating all of my experiences and all of my emotions, welcoming all of them, putting out a welcome mat to whatever feeling or experience comes my way, and saying, this all belongs here. This all belongs in my body, in my heart, in my mind. And what am I going to do with it? How am I going to let it shape me? And it was interesting to write this book that was so about myself. And then realized at the end it really was about finding community in an urban environment, which is not easy. And I think it really is, it's a combination of being really open, and it's also about really knowing who you are and finding, when I first met you, I couldn't take my eyes off of you. I felt like I know her already, like not just from high school, but like I saw something in you. I remember the first thing you said to me, I think I must have told you I was an illustrator, and you said you wanted to start, or you already had started, because you were trying to incorporate play into your life, and more play as an adult. And I thought, oh my gosh, yeah. I love that. I love that.
I love that you're talking about loneliness, because I think what oftentimes people think about book writing, I've never written a book outside of a cookbook, but it was the loneliest experience of my life, you know? And what's so interesting it is you do come out at the other end and realize, at least in my experience, it was, oh, this wasn't for me at all. You
Yeah.
know, it's so much more about community and other people. And I do think sometimes sharing from such an open place really leaves you feeling so raw in the process. So I'm really inspired to hear you say that. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I feel like the more you dig into yourself, the more you peel back the layers of yourself, the more you're learning about humans, because we're all like got a lot of the same fabric in our souls. And to really dig in there and learn very specifically about sadness and loneliness and all those things that we really try to pretend don't exist, the more you really sit with those, I think the more you can be so empathetic to other people. And I think that's something that makes really beautiful friendships.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think it is time for us to head over to our workshop.
Awesome. Cool. All you need for the workshop is a something to write with and something to write on. This is a very low stakes workshop. It's Twilight themed because we're going to get into contradicting and overlapping emotions. What do we do with these emotions that don't really fit? So we're going to do one quick journal warm up and then one little art project. Again, super low stakes. You do not have to be a certified artist to do this. I will not be checking for your artist card. I want to start with this little warm up, which is about what I call an emotional binary. I don't know if I made that up, but that's what I call it. So we tend to put our emotions into different boxes, right? We say, this is a negative experience, or this is a purely positive experience. But we know that's not true. If you've been alive in this world, you know that emotions sometimes come at the same time and they seem to contradict, but they're not opposites. They're just contradictions. And that's so beautiful. That's like what Twilight is. It's all of these different colors at once. You look at Twilight and you think, is this purple? Is this pink? Is this golden? I don't know. Looking at our feelings the same way really, again, puts out that welcome mat and lets them all belong. So we often will look at our emotions in these binaries, like these can't be together at the same time, sad and happy. They're opposites, but they're not opposites. If you've ever been to a wedding, you've probably experienced sadness and happiness at the same time. There's some grief there, right? It's like you're growing up, you're moving on, there's this little ache, there's kind of this longing that we see, in poetry about Twilight. We don't really know what to do with it. But of course, there's joy and there's celebration. It all belongs. And social media would have us think that there's only, one emotion allowed at a time. But humans are capable of 34,000 distinct emotions, and it would stand to reason that they would overlap and contradict a lot. So you can miss someone who really hurt you. You can not miss someone who was really awesome. You can, like I talk about in this book, have a very deep connection with someone you dated for 2 weeks. You can date someone for 5 years and feel like that wasn't very significant. All of this exists. You can experience grief in 1,000 different ways. You can laugh while you're grieving. You can cry when you're happy. Like all of this exists. There's so much richness in our bodies, and we live in a culture that really likes to splinter us up and say some feelings don't belong and some do. And that is so dangerous for us. It's so bad because it's going to come out. Your emotions are going to come out somewhere. So you might as well, make friends with them, embrace them. So this journal entry kind of challenges the idea that there are positive and negative emotions. We think of, okay, disappointed, angry, sad, that's in one category. Happy, delighted is in another. But we also tend to moralize those a little. So, you know, if I'm happy, I'm a good person. If I'm angry, I'm a bad person. And that's not true. You know, we have all of that. It all belongs. So I'm going to list 6 emotions that are just descriptions of various things. And you can journal, or you can just think about this. You could draw a little picture. But this is to get us thinking about feelings in a different way. I'm going to describe feelings, for example, the forest feeling. That's one of these. You might have grown up with forests, and to you, this is the feeling of being at home. You might have had a traumatic experience in a forest, and this will be a very upsetting feeling. And that's not good or bad, you know, that's your experience of this particular emotion. So I'm going to list these and maybe write down some things that this brings up. Like for me, the forest feeling would bring up coziness, intrigue, curiosity, safety, but also like a little bit of a risk at the same time. So I'm just going to list these and just jot down the first things that come to mind. No right answers, no wrong answers. This is your emotional experience. And I'm going to start with the fireplace feeling. So just let that sit for a minute.
I love that.
Does anything come up for you for fireplace?
For me?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I think I'm just so intrigued listening to you talk. I feel like I'm at a therapy session, to be honest. It's so soothing. I'm in this like deep state of relaxation right now.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Wow. Wow. What a great
Like
reaction.
I feel very much like I'm coasting right now.
Oh my gosh, great. Great. Maybe that's sort of like the Cape Town feeling, eating fish and relaxing. Oh, that's the feeling that I would love to give.
Has anything come up for you?
Fireplace, I think of as a very intimate feeling. That's like I want to be sharing that with someone. That's like, oh, there's kind of a longing there. That to me feels like I want to be like whispering next to someone. That's what it brings up for me at this moment.
Wait, oh, go ahead.
So I will list the next 5, and I'll give you a little time to jot these down. The forest feeling. So, like I said, that has really specific connotations for me, for you. Maybe you've never been to a forest. Maybe you can only think about reading them in books. The next one is the opening the curtains feeling. I think for a lot of people that might, I'm making big assumptions here, but that might bring up a new day filled with hope. But sometimes you open the curtains to a really beautiful day and you actually feel really anxious, or you might feel dread about what's coming next. And that can come along with hope. The next one is the silk feeling. That makes me sleepy, but it kind of reminds me of being like little and having like a little silk pillowcase or something. It feels like what babies like. It's very like soft.
It reminds me of a rope.
I like where that's going.
Yeah.
The next one, go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
The next one is the orange feeling. That might bring up the fruit. That might bring up a very beautiful clementine color. Orange is a really happy color to me, but maybe it's not for you. Maybe it was like your ex's favorite color, and now you're now you're thinking about them. The last one is the saxophone feeling. So you can share those with me on social media. You can keep them to yourself, but what I really want to drive home with that is that there are so many ways to describe what emotion you're having, and it all belongs. It all belongs. A feeling is data, and what it's telling you is that this thing matters to you. So if you get angry or if you get sad over something that you feel like, oh, why am I so sad about this? Or why am I so angry right now? It's because it's something matters to you. And that's not something to feel guilty about. It's not something to feel ashamed of. You might want to be a little discerning about who you tell, someone's like being trapped under a car and you're like, damn it, my latte isn't the right milk. Like, maybe don't, think who you share those feelings with, but they all matter. They all belong. If you're mad about your latte, you're mad about your latte. Don't yell at the barista, but let yourself know what matters to you. Let yourself, allow that in. And that's a really lush place to make art from. It's also a really lush place to make friends from. So our art element of this is to draw an emotional landscape. And I like drawing landscapes because it is pretty easy. If you can draw a straight line, you can draw a landscape. There are many different types of landscapes that you can draw. You could do an ocean, you could do a mountain scene with trees, you can live your Seattle dreams and have your landscape. You could do a desert. That's my favorite because it's the easiest. You just like draw sand and some cacti and you're good. So draw a landscape of any kind. And I want you to write a bunch of emotions down. And if you need some guidance, maybe think about the feelings you experienced today. This could take you hours, so we're not going to allow too much time. Like, I hope that you'll continue this later if you want to in your journal or whatever. But I like keeping my emotional landscape on my desk just to remind me of how many feelings I'm capable of and that they all belong here. If I think about, how rich and lush my inner world is, my inner sky, my inner landscape of feelings, there's so much that's there at the same time. And what I think is kind of interesting to do visually is to not ascribe certain emotions to certain parts of the landscape the way our societal constructs might. So maybe think of a rain cloud as happiness, and maybe think of the sunshine as disappointment. Think about peaks and valleys. If you draw a mountain, success doesn't have to be at the top of the mountain. What if success is coming down from the mountain? What if grief is at the top of the mountain? Think about playing with these a little bit so that we kind of rebel against what society has told us about emotions. They're all constructs. They're all just constructs. What you feel inside is what belongs to you. Another reason why I like to do this is because, on social media a lot, we might see someone say, I am so happy that I received these flowers today. And you might see a lot of comments that say, how can you be happy about that when there's these terrible things going on? Or how can you be happy about flowers when trees exist? Whatever. And what I like to think about, when those kinds of assumptions come up for me, or when people make those assumptions about me, is that to express an emotion is kind of like being in a landscape and picking up one leaf and examining it and looking at, the colors and all the texture and everything, and really like observing that and thinking, oh, that's really interesting. And then maybe drawing that leaf. And someone might say, how could you draw that leaf when there's the mountain right there? But it's all there in the landscape. It's all there. So I have already drawn my little desert. I don't think it's going to win an art contest, but it's mine. I drew it. So as I'm as I'm writing the emotions, I'll tell you a bit about the emotions I have experienced in a single day. So what I've heard a lot since launching my book is you must be so excited, or how exciting. That's one emotion. But I'm writing right now. I was a little disappointed that I didn't get to have a party. When did your book come out?
October.
Oh man.
Disappointed.
How did you celebrate? I'm gonna be writing my emotions as you tell me about your book launch feelings.
You know, I was in such a whirlwind of press that I didn't even think about celebrating. But I cooked with my partner, and we had a few friends over that are in our pot.
Yeah, nice.
We did that. Do you have big plans for a celebration?
No, I'm in my house.
Not now, but like maybe a Zoom party when all this is over.
I would love to do that. I would really love to do that. I feel like accomplishments are really meant to be shared, and they're wonderful to share in a community. I think then, the community has an opportunity to sort of, it's everyone's baby. Like when you create something, so many people went into that. Even if it was a lonely experience, you see like so many inspirations and so many people contributing to that experience. So it's really nice to take a beat and thank them and get to dress up and see them and all of that stuff. I'll take any excuse for a get together. So
I love that. I do have a question for you though, because in the Twilight area, you talk a little bit about there's an essay about dating in your early 30s, and how many mixed messages get sent in modern dating age, in this love arena that we've all found ourselves in. Why does that belong in the Twilight chapter?
That was one experience where I felt like nobody in my life, I mean, my friends are so amazing and empathetic, and everyone really was so sweet to me during that time, but people don't really know what to do with that experience. I dated for someone for 2 weeks. It was not a wide relationship, but it was a really deep one. And it affected me more than relationships that were a lot longer. And I feel like, our society has such a limited way of looking at certain things. Heartbreak is one, grief is another, where we don't know where to put it. We don't have rituals for it. We don't have like a place. We don't have like a mental place to even put it in our brains. It's like, oh, you were heartbroken over someone you met like 2 weeks ago. Like what? And I found that when I was, whenever I break up with someone, a question I often get from acquaintances is, how long were you together? And it's almost like they want to kind of let themselves off the hook. Like if it was under like 10 years, like, oh, thank God I don't have to like comfort her, like she'll be fine. Same when my dad died, people immediately say, oh, how close were you? And, if you're not really close, they're like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about something else, because it's uncomfortable. I get that. It's so human. But there's so much space for that. There's many different kinds of heartbreak. There's many different kinds of grief. And so I wanted to talk about this experience of feeling like, I felt like I'd met my husband, and then he rejected me after 2 weeks. And it's still hard. That was years ago. So yeah, that's why that went in that in-between place.
I love that, because I love Twilight. Like I love dawn, but I also love a sunset. Like I feel like those are the two times that I come alive. Like you, I do feel like there is so much to be learned from heartbreak and trauma. What are some of the things you've learned from the in-between time, that sticky area?
Ooh, I love that. There's so many treasures in the in-between time. I don't mean like happy things. I mean like knowing about yourself. I think you learn the most about yourself when you're in a transition. Because it's really, really hard to sit there. But once you really sit there and deepen into that time of change where you can't really like announce something about yourself, but you don't live in the other place. I think that's when you like really know who you are. And I think knowing who you are is like the journey of life. Like that is what we are here to do, is know who we are so that we can know other people better, and embrace and integrate our experiences so that we can have compassion for other people. And that is really hard to do. I don't do it very well, but those in between times have really enriched the way that I see myself. And when you don't have anything like to say about, when you don't have like the job, how do I say this? When you're like at a party and there are questions you're going to be asked and you don't have the answers you want for them, like if you're asked, what do you do? And you think, oh, I don't really want to talk about it. Or like,
Right.
are you dating anyone? And you're like, oh, well, I just dated this guy for 2 weeks and I thought he was the one and he's not. You don't really want to like announce that. I would rather say, oh my God, I just met this amazing guy and we hit it off and we're going to Cape Town. Like that's what I want to say. But when you can't say that about yourself, you have to come up with other ways to feel like really powerful in your own identity. And for me, that's like why I started drawing in the first place, was to have something to talk about other than the job I didn't like and the boyfriend I didn't have. So
no, I absolutely love that. Do you want to share did you do some writing?
I will share. Yeah, I didn't get all of it, but I just started. So I kind of decorated this with all these different emotions, and I just wrote them down, kind of stream of consciousness. I wanted to write. I'll finish this later because I actually do want to use this as a journal for my book launch experience. Again, I think people look at these accomplishments very specifically, like exciting.
Yeah.
You must be so happy. And there are other things that come too. So I wrote, I feel silly because I was dancing earlier before coming on here and it was very silly. Glamorous. This is like the most I've done myself up in over a year. Delighted. There's elements of delight. There's also doubt. And like I said, there's disappointment, there's overwhelm. There's self-doubt, there's a lot of insecurity, there's kind of a rawness, and all of it belongs in the same desert landscape. And it's all over the place. I do this little sunset because I wanted to show, that's one of those times that you can't really fit in a box, but it's also such a rich and beautiful and creatively stimulating time as well.
I love that. Well, it seems that we've got lots of Q&A.
Oh my goodness. All right.
Please.
I hope everyone's noticed my Books Are Magic mug. This is a great mug, everyone, by the way. I really do enjoy it. And also thank you again, Books Are Magic.
I wish I had gotten the memo because I would have, I live right around the corner from Books Are Magic.
My mason jar too. Oh my gosh, you do. That's perfect. Well, you got to get one. They're the best.
I'll get one. So I hope Michaela is asking, can you talk about Twilight times that aren't as explicit? Like there's not an event or a trauma, a thing, but you're still feeling in between. Ooh.
I mean, I think that's like the ultimate Twilight. That's the ultimate, is like, where do I place myself right now? There was a time a few months ago where people would ask me, how are you? And I'm a pretty like self-aware, introspective person. And I'd be like, I have no idea. I have no idea how I am. Like, am I the best I've ever been, or am I extremely depressed? You could tell me either and I'd believe it. I felt like I don't know which way is up. I've never been less creatively inspired, but I'm also like thinking about other things. I'm getting creative with cooking and some things that have intimidated me. Is that good? Is that, like, I think those times we've had such a blah past year, to say the very least. And I think a lot of us kind of feel like this gray, our inner sky is painted gray. And I think when when you're maybe at a job where you don't hate it, but you don't love it, or you're in a city that you're kind of trying to make work for you and it's just not happening, or you've got some good friends, but you feel like there could be some richer connections. Those are the real Twilight times to me, when you're kind of like, this isn't awful, but it's not great.
Right.
And those are the times that, now I look back and I think, oh, there actually was growth there. I just totally wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna just keep on going down the
Keep on rolling.
a bunch to get through. Someone says they are curious what narratives you wish we could remove from the ether about being single or about being in a relationship. This is good.
That is good. I want to hear your answer too. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think one thing that's kind of hard for me as someone who's been single a lot of my adult life is that we either see it as extremely pathetic. That's kind of the cartoonish stereotype we have. Or we see it as I don't need a man, and I'm so strong and independent, I can do everything myself. And I feel like I would love to be allowed the vulnerability and the complexity to say, I do love my own company so much. And sometimes it's really hard. And I feel like I have to kind of fit into either super strong and don't need help and don't need anyone. That's certainly not true. Or this very sad, insecure person. And I've never identified with either. And then being in a relationship is so hard. It takes demands at such a tremendously high level of emotional intelligence and self-awareness and vulnerability and self-knowledge and all these things. And I feel like nobody told me that. I thought it was just supposed to be fun all the time. And it actually is so difficult to be with someone and be real with them. And so it's all of these, there's a spectrum for both experiences. And there's so many narratives I'd love to get rid of.
Yeah. I would just add that I don't like the idea that being single means that you are not fit to be with someone, or that you need to be with someone in order to be valued. Mm-hmm. I would, if I could erase anything from this society, I would start there. And then the idea that being in relationships is rosy, there's nothing rosy about being in relationships. Relationships, like you said, are a lot of work, and they demand a lot. The best relationships demand a lot, and the worst even more. So
totally. I'd also love to add, I know we're running short, but I feel like this is my mission statement lately. I wish we treated friends the same way we treat romantic relationships in society, which is to say, why don't we move for our best friend? Why don't we travel with our best friend? Why don't we celebrate Valentine's Day with our best friend and leave our boo at home and celebrate that if friendships could be as valued as romantic relationships, I think that we'd get a lot further as a society and we'd be a lot less lonely. So
I agree. Someone wants to know, do you think when we collectively come into the dawn after the pandemic, we are in some way going to feel just as icky as we've been feeling stuck inside this past year, because we're going to be in an adjustment period?
Processing takes time.
Yeah.
I went on a spree early in the pandemic in the spring of reading a lot of poetry from World War II. And what I noticed is most of the poetry about the war was written 10 years later. People need time. We don't think about that because we have social media, which is incredibly instant and reactive, and we're kind of expected to have these real-time processing and real-time emotions. And It takes a really long time. So we're coming out of this collective trauma. We will be new people. When you experience trauma, your brain actually changes. And so we will be new people. And that's scary. That's hard. It's hard to adjust to that. It's hard to, I know a lot of people with social anxiety are getting pretty anxious about having, parties again. And that's going to be hard for everyone, even though we're talking about like, oh, the roaring 20s, and we'll be coming into this like amazing like nonstop party time, but that's a lot for our little systems. So everyone be so gentle and sweet with yourself as we go through this massive transition.
I couldn't agree more. Someone wants to know, are you inspired from positive or negative emotions / feelings, or is it both?
I don't like to call feelings positive or negative, but I know what you mean. And we have to do that in order to like function as a society and have easy vocabulary. I get it. But I would want to like play with that a little, because sadness for me is like such an incredibly creative place to be. So is that negative or positive? It's positive in some ways. It doesn't feel great. I would say both have a lot of value, but I would say the most valuable feelings are the ones that take the most of my attention. So if that's delight in like a new baby or a vacation or something, and I'm so delighted, that's taking so much of my attention, my focus. That's going to really transform me, and that's going to have a lot of value. If I'm going through a really, really hard time, that's going to take all of my attention. And then I'll probably write during that time. That has value too. So the ones that take the most of my attention are the most valuable ones.
Okay. Someone is asking, they said, do you have any advice for building community during this time? Trying to do it virtually feels sort of like an impossible challenge. I couldn't agree more.
I think it is. I mean, I know this is a controversial statement, but I get asked a lot like, how should I date during this time? Or how should I make friends during this time? And I kind of think I don't know, people can like argue with me about this, but I kind of think it might not happen. And we have to kind of like sit in that time of like, shoot, I'm probably not going to make a new friend in the next couple months. I'm probably not going to meet the love of my life in the next few months. What can I do with this? What can I be present to? Is it loneliness? Is this the time I learn how to be lonely? Is this the time I learn how to really be with myself? Maybe, it's I think, virtual, like I get so much energy from being like physically with someone. For me, it would be really difficult, but people are joining online book clubs and that kind of thing. So maybe some people are figuring it out. I will say, with the people you already know, like the people you already are friends with, ramp up the communication. I send audio notes, like they're going out of style, audio messages or voice notes. And that's been the way that I've communicated with people. And I've gotten way closer to a lot of my friends who were acquaintances, a few months ago. And now they're some of my closest friends. And I haven't seen them, but we're in that constant communication. So maybe like focus on the community you already have, and then we'll expand when we can.
I love it. Someone wants to know, do you experience vulnerability hangovers? If so, how do you work through them? This is a Brene Brown question.
I know. I wish she was here. Gosh, wish we had invited her. I feel like a lot of folks in the internet world, including myself, have mistaken vulnerability for honesty. Those are different. Vulnerability, there's like a risk you're taking. You're really putting something out there that's there's a bit of a challenge in doing it. It's a little scary. That's not what I do. If I was scared of the things that I put on Instagram, I would be like nonstop traumatized. It's not that vulnerable for me. It's honest, but it's not vulnerable. The things that are really vulnerable are like putting this book out, because it's something that people buy. It's something that people like hold and consume. And I'm selling it. There's a lot of vulnerability there in offering something. Whereas on Instagram, it's free. It's like pretty low stakes. And I feel like putting my feelings out there isn't a much of a risk for me. But those things where you're like, oh, I have to like offer this to the world and some people want it and some people don't. That's really hard. So the vulnerability hangover is just knowing what I can control. I can't control what people think. I can't control if people are going to buy it. I can't control if people are going to like it. But I can control, my experience of it. And I can say I really did love writing it. So.
Okay. So Beth Morrison. Hi, Beth. Beth is my high school best friend.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Beth.
Beth says she's from Seattle. She also grew up in Ballard. My question is, how do you navigate writer's block or times when you feel stalled or frustrated in your creative process?
I know that's so real. I felt it for a whole year this past year, so I'm very, very intimate with it. Three things come to mind quickly. One is to just not write for a while, focus on other things. Two is to let yourself be a little scared. I think sometimes writer's block is actually just fear. It's like, oh, I know what to write, but I'm not going to write it. So I'm trying to think of other things to write, but write what wants to come out, and you don't have to share it with anyone. Or three, do a completely different genre or a different art than you've ever done. I had to stop doing illustration for a while this year because I couldn't think of anything. I was totally blocked from my own like experiences. So I had to do something totally different. Started, writing some poems, that kind of thing. So either make it new for yourself or let yourself be a little scared, or just take a break. That's totally allowed.
I love that you said fear is a great thing. I too do believe that fear is a great tool to use and to have in your arsenal. Someone is asking, they said, why do you think we don't always show ourselves the same love and care that we show to others? This is a good one and a tough one.
Oh, that's such a good question. I think because we know ourselves really well, and we know everything that's going on in there, and we know all of our insecurities, we know all of our doubts, we know all of that. We don't know those things in other people. We don't know all the shadows that are going on in other people. We see like slivers of them, and if we could see other people with like wholeness, that will make us a lot more compassionate. And if we see the kind of slivers that we project on other people and ourselves, that will probably make us a little more confident. So take those slivers and really like shine light bulbs on them. What would you say about that? I know you to be such a confident and just radiant person, and I feel like you're probably an expert at self-love, but it's hard.
It is really hard. I'm not an expert, but I have been practicing a lot of it. I try to see myself in the same lens that I see other people. So I always remind myself to look at me the same way I would look at my neighbor or my friends. And sometimes I actually get up and look in the mirror and say, hey, that's not true. Say that over again. But I always try to look at myself in the same lens as I look at other people, which is always from a place of kindness.
You do have to parent yourself a little, right? You have to say like, nope, we don't say that. That those words aren't allowed in this body. Like you have to kind of like rein it in sometimes, be a little bit out of a
or even saying things out loud about yourself and then saying, that's not true. That's not true. I'm just scared.
Yeah.
Paul is asking a question, and Paul is saying, what advice would you give someone who really wants to journal and write about personal experience and emotions, but as soon as they sit down to write, the struggle to effectively capture the thought just goes away. They hit a wall and they say that someone is me.
Paul, we're all you, Paul. We're all Paul.
You.
Yeah, I mean that's so common. That's so common. I don't think there's anyone who sits down consistently and is like, oh, I just brilliant thoughts. No. Paul, I'm going to give you an assignment. You probably text your friends, guessing, wild guess. Maybe you write Instagram captions. Let's go with texting though. That's a little more like intimate. Maybe transcribe one of your texts in your journal and then kind of go from there. Because texting is the same as writing. You're already on your way. You're probably revealing things to your friends that you may not even reveal in your journal. I find that the best writing advice I ever got was write as though you're talking to someone specific. So don't write for an audience. Write for like one person. Write to your mom. Write to your friend. So maybe like transcribe a text and then just keep writing to that friend. See what happens.
I love that. That's wonderful advice. I also think the Notes app is a great
best friend. Yeah.
You just want to write some thoughts down while you're walking around or
totally. I mean, my Notes app is a mess, but I think it's in a kind of delightful way.
Mine too. Okay, we've got a few more questions and then I think we're gonna be set. I'm loving all these questions. Someone wants to know, how do you think social media and people trying to show a very cultivated side of themselves has affected their own personal Twilight emotions?
Oh,
Mac, okay.
Oh man, social media is so weird, right? It's so weird because we know that we're going through all kinds of things. And, I will tell you, like, sometimes I am in the best mood ever and for like a number of weeks and I won't post anything and I'll just forget about it. I'll totally forget about Instagram, and then I'll be in like a really sad place and I'll post like myself smiling, and I think this is so funny. It's like nobody has the real story. So yeah, I mean, we're always doing that, and I think we know that about ourselves. We know there's always such a bigger, richer, like gianter story going on, but we don't really give that same grace to other people. We'll look at a post and think, what is she doing on vacation, or whatever, and you know so little about it. So those in between times, they're kind of interesting because it's not like something to announce, and announcements are great for social media. You get like so affirmed, and it's it's something to say, but those times when you're like, I don't even know what's going on, those are the times you're actually probably most observant, and maybe you'll take a picture of something like a beautiful building or something in your own home that you suddenly find so beautiful because you're really present to what's going on, as opposed to kind of caught up in your own wanting to announce things about yourself. So maybe take those in between times to be really present, and then you might look back on that post 2 months later and you're like, why did I think that flower was so worth documenting or whatever? And just be aware that everyone's in an in between time all the time, because hello, that's the human experience. That's where we live.
Aside from art, do you have any favorite rituals that you do daily or weekly, especially during this past year? This is from Katie.
Aw, Katie, I'm such a rituals person. I have rituals for everything. I think one thing that's been kind of interesting this past year is just like how we all seem to be really like so into nature all of a sudden, and the outdoors, and spending time outside. And that was certainly my experience. I've never been much of a nature girl, but I actually moved to Brooklyn to be closer to the park, which is such a wonderful place to be. And one thing that I find really soothing and really brings me to my present is to take the same exact walk every day and just see the little ways that it changes. See, how does this look in this gray light, and how does this look in the snow? How does the same building look? What's going on in there? How these like smaller changes that I think we're more attuned to now that there's not a whole lot more going on. I also I've been working during the day, not in my house. And when I come home, I'm often really, really tired. I'll immediately take a bath. I used to think that baths were only for like right before you're going to sleep, but now I immediately take a bath. And I find that such a beautiful like entryway into evening. So if your day right now is like one long blur with no markers for like, the morning and afternoon, it's just all blurs together, maybe take a bath at 5 p.m. and that's like your evening.
Okay, I'm gonna try that.
Little, early evening bath, happy hour bath time.
Yeah. Um, Someone wants to know, Jaden wants to know, do you think that we're ever free from Twilight, or does it exist in every part of our life?
Oh, I think all of the times of day exist in all of our times of life. Um, I think there are some times that we just assume are going to be really happy. The dawns or the golden hours of life where like, oh, I'm set now. Everything's everything's so sparkling. But we're always in a transition, right? Like we're always in some kind of transition, and I don't know if it's something that I really want to be free from. It can be such a beautiful experience to be like constantly evolving and growing, and I don't want to stop that as challenging as it may be.